What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the J Area Podcast. My name is Jose, and for those of you that keep up with the podcast, you would know that I'm a huge sports fan that enjoys talking about the San Francisco 49ers and the Golden State Warriors, amongst other areas of topic regarding sports. And to open up this episode, first off, I'm wishing and hoping that everyone had a wonderful Christmas break as well as a happy holidays. And as we approach the new year, 2023, of course, we're going to start off the episode, as I always do, with a little bit of update from the San Francisco 49ers, who come off a great victory against the Washington Commanders. You know, heading into this matchup, a lot of speculation on whether Brock Purdy and the 49ers were going to be able to continue their winning streak, you know, being that they were matching up with the number 4 defense in the league with the Commanders. But the San Francisco 49ers were able to emerge victorious by a score of 37-20, improving their record to 11 wins and 4 losses, and dropping the Commanders to a 7-7-1 record. Now, although they may have a 7-7-1 record, the Commanders are still capable of making the playoffs, given a little bit of help with other games that involve like the Packers and the Lions. Those are the two teams that are kind of vying for that last playoff spot, as well as the Seattle Seahawks. But the 49ers take control of that game. You know, heading into halftime, the score was 7-7, and all looked a little bit tight. But in the second half, the 49ers were able to score 30 points. They went on a 30-13 run to close out that second half, which is phenomenal. That's what we need from this team at this moment. Brock Purdy finishes with 22 pass attempts, 15 of them being completed, 234 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. An interception, I might add, that really wasn't his fault. It was based off of a deflection to one of his receivers, thus ending up in the defender's hands. Ray McCloud with a 71-yard touchdown rush early on in the game, which really seemed like a design play for Deebo Samuel, but given the blocking by George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey, it was a beautiful 71-yard play to really get the game in motion and establish the run game early on for this Niner team. George Kittle, 6 receptions, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns to match, giving him back-to-back games where he scored 2 touchdowns as a result of Brock Purdy's quarterbacking. Brandon Ayuk even had 5 receptions of his own, accounting for 81 yards receiving. Nick Bosa with 2 sacks, who's continuing to establish himself as the frontrunner for the NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And quite frankly, I believe he should win his award. You know, with all due respect to Micah Parsons, I believe that when you are the best defender on the best defense, that counts for something. And given that coming out of this Washington game, he has now amassed 17.5 sacks, which are 2 sacks away from the franchise record that Aldon Smith had set in 2012, and it is 5 away from tying the single season record that was set by Michael Strahan over 2 decades ago and was tied by TJ Watt just last year. Nick Bosa is a big proponent as to how this defense has become so dominant and how they're able to hold their opponents to 15 points a game. Not only did he have 2 sacks, but Fred Warner also accounted for 13 total tackles. Jimmy Ward with the interception that San Francisco would secure later in the game. Overall, this team, top to bottom, I believe, is just built for the playoffs. I think they're built for a long playoff run, and I'm hoping that they are capable of doing so coming playoff time. You look at this team, the team stats, Washington would defeat the Niners by their time of possession, which I believe is a very important statistic regarding any game, whether or not it is a playoff game, a regular season game, or who's involved. The time of possession is a big indicator of which team is really dominating. The Washington Commanders would have it for 34 minutes to San Francisco's 26. They would, have 2 turnovers of their own to San Francisco's 1. And in the red zone, they were 2 out of 3. And you look at San Francisco, who were 1 for 5. I wouldn't say it's an alarming statistic, but that's definitely something I feel like we should be bumping up, because we're leaving points on the board. Now, to say that it would have been a tightly contested game against the Commanders is an understatement. I do think in order to secure a long playoff run, we need to be able to capitalize in the red zone. Because if we're facing teams like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Minnesota Vikings who can put up points as we have seen, or perhaps even a team like in the Chiefs, 1 for 5 in the red zone is not going to cut it. We're leaving points on the board, which has been a concern of mine for the last couple of years, where we're resulting to field goals. Field goals are great. Field goals are a way to secure points and to continue the trajectory upward. However, you're not going to win a game by settling for field goals. Sometimes you got to be a little bit more aggressive. And of course, depending on the circumstance and depending on the moment in that game, a field goal might be the smarter play. But 1 out of 5 in the red zone is not going to cut it. Running the ball, however, has been our bread and butter. It's what brought us to the dance, and it's what's going to keep us at the dance. Because if you look at Washington, they were held to under 80 yards rushing, whereas we were 153 yards rushing on the ground. The running attack established by the Shanahans, whether it is Mike or Kyle, have become a staple to this offense. Whether it was in Denver, whether it was in Washington, whether it was in Atlanta, and now San Francisco. It is definitely an offense that allows the field to open up in a sense, because when you establish the run, you're going to bring in the defenders towards the line of scrimmage, thus opening the field for more of a passing attack that we have seen Brock Purdy been able to capitalize on. We've seen many of his passes thrown to the left side of the field, downfield, I should say. Then that's where George Kittle comes into play, and guys like Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel when he's finally cleared to come back. This offense is predicated on the run. And if you look at yards per play, the Washington Commanders had averaged just above 5 yards per play, 5.1 to be exact, whereas San Francisco averaged over 7 yards per play. And that has a lot to do with not only the running capabilities of Christian McCaffrey, but also the passing attack that Brock Purdy has been able to bring forward to this 49er offense. You look at the third downs also, that's something I wanted to mention. They were 4 of 11 on third down, which isn't really an alarming statistic, but it's definitely something that we have something to look forward to and to improve upon. On third down, we need to be able to secure these first downs because they beat us in first downs gained. I think that we are lessening our opportunities to get on third down by securing first downs early on. But when you get on third down, you want to ensure that you're on third and short. Let's say we're at 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, something manageable. You hate to be on 3rd and 7s, or worse, even 3rd and longs. I think that's definitely something that we could use some improvement on, and that's okay, because no team is perfect. No team is going to go into the playoffs thinking that there's no adjustments to be made, because that's just fool's gold. You're thinking that you have everything figured out when you don't. And these are issues and holes that we should be able to fill heading into the playoffs. Some key notes coming out of the Washington game before I preview the Las Vegas Raiders game. I just wanted to point out that the George Kittle and Brock Purdy connection is alive and well. This is back-to-back games where George Kittle has had 2 touchdowns in one game. Now, granted, he did sort of steal a touchdown away from one of his teammates. However, a point is a point. A touchdown is a touchdown, and if I'm his teammate, I'm just glad we're scoring touchdowns. I think it's very important, though, because it's demonstrating how on different nights there are different stars being highlighted. Whether it is a guy like Christian McCaffrey going off for a touchdown rush, receiving, and throwing the ball, or if it's Deebo Samuel with his physicality being able to run over his opponents, Brandon Ayuk being able to speed past the defenders and scoring in the end zone, or George Kittle going over the middle and scoring multiple touchdowns. That's the type of offense that I've been looking for all season. If you head back into the archive episodes earlier this season, one of my main concerns was that of putting up points, because having a talented roster, you would think more points are coming. And since having Brock Purdy and certainly Christian McCaffrey being added to the offense, we're not averaging 28 points per game, which is way better than the 23, 24 points per game we were averaging prior to the addition of Christian McCaffrey, as well as the starting position of Brock Purdy. The defense is doing its job. It's doing phenomenal. As long as they're able to maintain this level of consistency where they're allowing offenses to put up less than 20 points. I personally would love to see them hold on to that mark of 15. you're only allowing 2 touchdowns or whatever combination leads to the score of 15. That is a recipe for victory, because you're telling me you're only allowing 15 points per game, and all we have to do is average 21 points per game. Now, granted, I don't think we should. I think we should continue to average the 28 points per game that we've been doing, and we've been doing it quite effectively and quite well. But you look at games like Denver, where we had lost, 11-9. We held our opponents at 11 points, but the offense was unable to score points. So long as our defense is able to limit the opposition to the least amount of points, and our offense is firing on all cylinders as it has been during this 8-game winning streak, that's a recipe for success. That is why heading into this Sunday's matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders, who, might I add, are ranked currently as one of the worst teams in the league. Now, I'm not here trying to bash the Raiders or anything like that, but just statistically, you look at their commitment on defense, the production on offense. Yes, they are 6-9, but they're not really a threat, and especially given that they're benching Derek Carr and they're moving forward with Jarrett Stidham, who, no disrespect to him, but with it was around 60 pass attempts in his career, and now you're tasked with facing the number 1 defense in the league, where some pundits, some analysts are praising it as the next 2000s Ravens. I mean, that might be a little bit far-fetched, but still, to be named in that same breath of the 2000s Ravens, that's something, to marvel at. That's amazing. The Raiders, who are fresh off of a loss to the Pittsburgh Steelers, 13-10. Adams is coming off a game where he only had 2 catches for 15 yards, and he was targeted 9 times, but it was only connected with 2 out of 9. Josh Jacobs, who is the leading rusher in the NFL, he currently has 1,539 yards on the ground. Like I said, good enough to be first in the league, ahead of guys like Derrick Henry, who was 110 yards behind him. Also, Davante Adams, again, no slouch. He's one of the best wide receivers in the games. He's 5th on the receiving list currently right now, just 10 yards shy of 1,300 yards. Looking at guys like Davante Adams and Josh Jacobs, I definitely think that those are 2 offensive weapons to keep an eye out on. I trust our defense, though, especially with an inexperienced quarterback like Jarrett Stidham. I do anticipate the rush to be on. The pressures are going to be on. I'm hoping that Nick Bosa is able to get to him at least twice and secure that franchise record 19.5 sacks in a season that Aldon Smith had set back in 2012. Even setting up an opportunity perhaps to tie TJ Watt and Michael Strahan for the single season record of sacks at 22.5. It would be a stretch, certainly, because if we're able to perform at the way that I think we can, we'll probably be able to put this game away early and perhaps start resting our guys and just start prepping for the playoffs. At this point of the season, it's really just about limitations and limiting their playing time, ensuring that they are still in playing shape and they get used to the rhythm and the flow of a game, but at the same time, you don't want to overwork them and overplay them. And speaking of overwork and overplay, I saw on Twitter that the Las Vegas Raiders are currently dead last in opposing rushing attacks. So I'm thinking to expect a Christian McCaffrey, Jordan Mason heavy kind of game. I'm thinking the running backs, perhaps even Kyle Juszczyk, which I would love to see more of. It's always a pleasure seeing Kyle Juszczyk being used in the offense, aside from being a blocker. I would expect a heavy game, a heavy dosage of the run game, I should say, against the Las Vegas Raiders. We're currently favored. Last time I checked, it was a minus 6.0. I certainly think we'll be able to cover the spread. I'm thinking we're going to win double digits. If we don't win by 2 touchdowns, I will certainly be surprised. Minus 6.0 I think is very generous. And I believe that was the line prior to the benching of Derek Carr. So again, something to look out for there if you are a betting fan. Las Vegas, they currently ranked 25th in defense. Of course, San Francisco's first. They're allowing 23.3 points a game. We're only allowing 15.3. That's a huge difference there. A full touchdown, if you will. Offensively, we are 9th. The Raiders are 14th. And points per game, the Raiders are putting up 23.2, whereas the Niners are currently putting up 25 on the yearly average. But as I mentioned, with the acquisition of Christian McCaffrey as well as Brock Purdy playing the way he's playing, it's somewhere around the 28 points per game limit there. And another thing that many people haven't really been talking about during the week, but that the Raiders and the Niners are one of the most historic rivalries in the NFL. Of course, everyone recognizes them for the Battle of the Bay. Although the Raiders are no longer in the Bay Area, it's still remnants of that rivalry. And for those that aren't aware, they've only faced 14 times in the past. This is their 15th meeting between the two franchises. The current record is 7-7. 7 wins for the Raiders, 7 wins for the 49ers, with their last meeting taking place November 1st, 2018, and would be a thrashing by the 49ers, 34-3, in a game that many Niner fans will recall the game that Mostert had suffered his injury, and Mullins coming to save the day for the Niners. Certainly a game I'm looking forward to. I believe that the Niners should win. As I mentioned, I think it's going to be a double-digit lead. Certainly, I think 14 points isn't too much to ask for. The Niners, of course, will look forward to that game, and following that game, we have the Arizona Cardinals, but the last thing we want to do is to look forward and look past the Raiders, because I do believe this has trap game written all over it. Whether you are a football fan, a diehard football fan, or, just a casual fan, you have to be wary of these trap games. Everyone is going to expect that the Niners are going to destroy the Raiders. I have a friend at work who's a Raiders fan, and he even thinks that we're going to beat them. He's holding out hope, of course, for Jarrett Stidham. But it's these type of games where you anticipate a victory, and then somehow, some way, the underdog and the opposition somehow pulls it off. And I'm hoping that that's not the case, because I'm looking at the current slate of games for this Sunday, and my eyes immediately direct themselves towards the Minnesota Vikings and the Green Bay Packers, which has intrigue written all over it. For many reasons, of course. It is a NFC North matchup. Although the Vikings have already clinched the division, there are several implications that come with it. Of course, it's a big rivalry game. We know how Aaron Rodgers is with his NFC North rivals. But it also has playoff implications, because the Green Bay Packers are still mathematically alive for that 7th seed in the NFC. Of course, they're going to need some help from other games, given that the Lions, the Washington Commanders, the Seattle Seahawks are all ahead of the Packers. They're in win now mode. They cannot afford to lose games. They have to win out, in addition to having everything fall into place for them. So, although they do not control their own destiny, they do have a sense of ownership of the path needed to make the playoffs. So I'm hoping, deep down, that they do us the favor and they defeat the Minnesota Vikings. Because the Minnesota Vikings lose a game, and we win a game, and we take possession of that 2nd seed in the NFC. Now, granted, is it likely? This week, I think there's a shot. I really do. But if not, hey, whatever. We'll take New York in the first round come playoff time. But we get that 2nd seed, and we get 2 home games, and assuming, let's just say, for the sake of this narrative, that the Philadelphia Eagles are somehow eliminated in the divisional round, and we win the divisional round, then that NFC Championship game will be at Levi Stadium, giving us a 3rd home game in this year's playoffs. And if we're so fortunate enough to punch our ticket to Glendale, Arizona, home of the Super Bowl this year, travel will be fantastic. It won't be that far of a travel day, because Arizona, as we know, is neighbors to California. And last time I checked, when we had played in Arizona, we had a bunch of 49er fans in attendance. That's, what, would you say 3.5 home games? Ridiculous. That's perfect. That is literally the perfect situation as a 49er fan. So we're hoping for a Minnesota loss, a San Francisco victory, and then we'll go from there. Because as long as they tie with the Vikings, as long as they have a tied record with the Vikings, they secure that 2nd seed as a result of the conference records, which the Niners have a better record at. So there's still hope for that 2nd seed. In fact, there's still hope for that 1st seed. But not only do we have to win out, but we need the Eagles to lose their final 2 games. which is no easy ask, because I do think that the Eagles, top to bottom, have one of the better rosters. I don't think they're better than the Niners, but they do have one of the better rosters in the league. Although they're missing Jalen Hurts, Gardner Minshew has proven to be a talented enough quarterback to where he doesn't have to lose the game. As long as he's making the right calls, as long as he's making the right plays, they should be fine. So, is the first seed a possibility? Absolutely. Is it likely? Not at all. I don't think it's going to happen. I think we'll settle for the second seed. And even if we have the third seed, that's fine too. That doesn't bother me quite, as much as you would think it would. But right now, we're locked and loaded on that second seed. And given that, the Niners are on an 8-game winning streak. There is a possibility we're able to finish off the regular season with 10 games under our belt, a 10-game winning streak. And if we want to get to where we want to get, and that is obviously the Super Bowl, we would likely have to win a wildcard game, a divisional round game, a NFC championship, and of course the Super Bowl itself, which would mean that the Niners would have to go on a 14-game winning streak, something we haven't accomplished since 1994. I'm not certain it was 14 games, but it was certainly in that realm of 12, 13 type of streak. But 14 games is ridiculous. And you want to talk about streaks, right? This is the perfect segue to moving on to the other team in the Bay Area, and that is the Golden State Warriors, who are currently in the midst of a 3-game winning streak. Of course, these are all home games, and if you listened to last week's episode, you would know my feelings about our home and away games. If you don't know, I would highly suggest you visit our archive episodes and visit last week's, where I dive into the intrigue of our home and away records. But as of right now, as of this recording, and as of this release, which would be December 30th, the Golden State Warriors are in the midst of a 3-game winning streak. Of course, on Christmas Day, they would defeat the Memphis Grizzlies by a score of 123-109. Good enough for a 16 wins, 18 loss record, and 11th in the West. Unmarked territory for the Golden State Warriors, of course, is the team that is recognized for being amongst one of the better franchises in the NBA, certainly a championship contender in recent years. However, this game just was something else, right? It's been brewing since last year in the playoffs when Memphis and Golden State faced each other, and it's kind of a budding rivalry, whereas Memphis is trying to take claim to the Golden State Warriors spot in the West. But as of right now, it's not that much of a rivalry. Of course, it got a little bit chippy because there were 6 total technical fouls being given out to the Golden State Warriors. Jordan Poole got ejected late in the fourth quarter. Clay and Draymond Green were seen taunting the opposition all game long, even getting techs, of course, because he can't do anything in the NBA without getting a technical. And this is a game without Stephen Curry and Andrew Wiggins, who are 2 of our best players on the Golden State Warriors. This is against a healthy Grizzly team, and of course, Ja Morant, who has been putting up a season that had some people talking about an MVP caliber season, but certainly a huge win for the Warriors, who also obtained a huge win against the Boston Celtics about last month, demonstrating that they're really able to perform well against top talent. And these are teams that, quite frankly, they shouldn't be defeating, and they are. Yet they lose to other teams that they shouldn't be losing to. Of course, times are different once we pass the All-Star break, and I'm hoping that they're able to flip the switch and become the Warriors that we've known and love. But that wasn't the only game that they had this week. They would also go on to defeat the Charlotte Hornets 110-105. Clay would score 29 points, Jordan Poole adding 24 points of his own. And then just recently, the Utah Jazz, they would defeat them by a score of 112-107, with Jordan Poole scoring 26 points. Klay Thompson, of course, did not play because he does not play back-to-backs this season, still working out the kinks on his injuries and trying to really regain his feet from under him. But the Golden State Warriors have not only been one of the more interesting stories in the NBA, not only because they're the defending world champions, but also because of their home and away record that has just been, really just opposite of one another. Because when they're home, they're winning all these games. When they're away, they can't pick up any victories. I know last week we talked about how they were 3-16. Currently, they haven't had a road win. They haven't had a road game since Christmas. And as I was mentioning, they're not the only team here with an interesting story. You want to talk about streaks. The Brooklyn Nets, with Steve Nash, did not look too good. They were all over the place. There was no sense of direction, and the duress in Brooklyn was real. They get rid of Steve Nash, and they move on to Coach Vaughn. They are currently on a 10-game winning streak and have skyrocketed to the top ranks of the defensive teams in the NBA, with guys like Kyrie Irving, guys like Kevin Durant running the show. And Kevin Durant's all-world. I would know, because he spent a couple years in Golden State, even earning 2 Finals MVPs. But the Brooklyn Nets, again, at the moment, are the 2nd seed in the East. Are the Brooklyn Nets a team that we should be really watching out for? Can this team make a run in the playoffs? Because no one seems to be talking about them. Instead, we're talking about guys like the Boston Celtics, the Milwaukee Bucks. But are we skipping out on the Brooklyn Nets? Is this a team that we should be keeping up with? I know certainly as the NFL season is starting to wind down, my attention starts diverting itself back to the NBA. But the Brooklyn Nets for a while had become an afterthought, much like how the Lakers have been, the last year. But now that they're in the midst of a 10-game winning streak, have they figured it out? I don't know, something to keep an eye on, as well as the MVP race. Because Luka Doncic, I think, might have secured himself a spot in that contention. Luka Doncic, what he's doing this year is ridiculous. You saw him have a 60, 20, and 10 game the other night. And then he goes off and scores another 35. The ability that this guy has to score at will is phenomenal. He's one of my favorite players to watch. Granted, he might be a little bit of a liability when it comes to defense, but his offensive prowess and the firepower that he's able to contribute to Dallas is unmatched. I only wish that he would have a team built around him that would also be able to alleviate some of the stress and some of the workload that he faces, because Luka Doncic cannot score 60-plus points, 20-plus rebounds, and 10-plus assists just to earn an overtime victory over the New York Knicks. Because when you face deep teams like Denver, teams like Phoenix, maybe even Memphis, that's not going to cut it. You can't resort to that. You can't hope that your guy's going to drop 70 in a 7-game series. Of course, there's still time for them to improve. But Luka Doncic is all NBA, all world even. I had him take the MVP award earlier this year, and you can ask my friends. I said, hey, Luka Doncic for MVP, keep an eye on. But the Dallas Mavericks certainly need to build around him, because I would not be surprised if he just decided to leave, come free agency. You want to talk about MVPs? How about the current reigning, defending, back-to-back MVP? Because Nikola Jokic, he's putting up good numbers himself. This guy's a walking triple-double, on the verge of being a third-time or three-peat MVP winner. Because I can certainly see voters giving him votes just on the merit and the ability that he has to lead this Denver Nugget team. Now, I know it might not be one of the sexiest games in the NBA, because he's not really an offensive guru or he's an offensive machine. But his efficiency, not only can he rebound, but he can pass, he can score, he can shoot a three, he can go off in the paint. He's not your prototypical center, and I love it. Do I think he wins a third MVP in a row? No, I don't think so. But I didn't think he was going to go back-to-back, and he did. And at this moment, I can certainly see that if the Nuggets earn the number 1 seed, Jokic continues to play the way Jokic does, I wouldn't be surprised if the NBA voters ended up giving him a third MVP in a row. And at that rate, he's already a Hall of Famer. No, he's not a champion. But how many guys do you know can win 3 straight MVPs like that in today's league? Because there's a lot of talent in today's league. You want to talk about young talent? How about the New Orleans Pelicans, who seemingly are the number 1 seed in the West every other day, just depending on the standings? With a guy like Zion Williamson, who I'm so happy for, by the way, because early on I was afraid he was going to be a bust, just solely due to his health. But now, he's in the best shape of his NBA career. They're in the midst of a 4-game winning streak, and he just scores 43 the other night. And you look at their last 10 games, and he's averaging 31 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. That's MVP numbers as well. In that same span of 10 games, we're talking 63% from the field, 50 from the 3, 70 from the line. Zion Williamson is really maturing and growing into a star of his own, and I'm here for it. And every chance I get, I will give my friend Daniel, his props, because heading into the preseason, or heading into the regular season, coming out of the preseason, I should say, he was hyping up the Pelicans and saying this team is for real, and I didn't buy it. Not at all. I thought, that's cute. They'll probably make a little bit of noise. But they're the number 1 seed. And they're still missing a guy like Brandon Ingram. And you add him, Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum, Jose Alvarado, Murphy, and plenty others as well. But this team is deep. Can they make a deep playoff run? I don't know. And it's like the conversation we had at my job. If they're going up, let's say they make the finals, right? And if they're going up against the guys like the Boston Celtics or even the Milwaukee Bucks, I might have to go for the East just because of experience. Because that matters for something. You need to be able to handle those situations and understand the volume and the weight of that moment. And God forbid the Pelicans meet up with the Celtics in the finals, because the Celtics got embarrassed just last year against the Warriors. You don't think Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, you don't think they're going to be wanting to come back and win a championship? And especially what happened with, their coach, Ime Udoka? I don't know. I feel like the Celtics are on a mission. Now, I'm not going to say that they've looked the best, but I mean, again, it's still the regular season. And I think they're a team capable of flipping the switch. But as the season progresses, I certainly think it is something to keep in mind. The Golden State Warriors are in the middle of a winning streak. The Niners in the middle of a winning streak. Life is good right now in the Bay Area, aside from the Giants. But of course, there's the dreaded superstition that my brother likes to bring up, and he says we can never have both. Where the Niners are doing well, the Warriors are trash. And when the Warriors are doing well, the Niners are struggling. At this very moment, if you ask me who I would choose to start winning some more games, I'll side with the Niners. I've seen the Warriors win 4 championships. 2015, 2017, 2018, 2022. And all we're waiting for is that Lombardi trophy. And I just got to say, the way this team is currently built and the way they're playing, I'm getting my hopes up again. And I just really hope they don't prove me wrong. So as we bring this episode to a close, again, I want to give a major thanks to all of you guys listening and continue to support the podcast. As always, you can find me on all social media platforms at justjose_3. Be sure to follow the podcast on Spotify or subscribe to our YouTube channel, J Area Podcast, where you can find each of these episodes of the show. Hey, and once again, thank you for dropping by and hanging out with us. And if you enjoy these episodes, be sure to give it a like, comment your thoughts on the NBA and NFL season, and also please subscribe to the YouTube channel, J Area Podcast, where we're getting increasingly views, but many of those views are coming from those that are unsubscribed. So please subscribe to the channel. It really helps with the product and helps with the promotion of each video. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Jose Ramos. This has been the J Area Podcast. And hey, I can't wait to see you next week.